I'm here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church. Today is the 5th day in our Novena to St. Maria Goretti. And just a reminder that you can find a link to the printout of this novena in the description below the video. Now, if you print it out double-sided, it might look strange because you have pages that don't go together this way. So if you print it out double-sided with a short-sided binding and fold it, then it all makes sense. And you go from page to page and it all comes together. Those are your instructions. Now, let us continue with the life of St. Maria Goretti, written by Marie Cecilia Buehrle. We're skipping ahead now to chapter 13. How lovely are thy tabernacles. Tomorrow, said Assunta, clearing the last shovelful of ashes from the fireplace, I am going to Netuna for confession. I'll go with you, Mama, Maria called from the farther corner of the kitchen, which she had just finished sweeping. More and more often Maria wanted to go to confession, and Assunta's heart grew heavy at the thought that she was nearing the proper age for her first Holy Communion, and would not be able to go as other children do who attend school and live in parishes. Maria's thoughts were moving along the same channel. When, Mama, she asked in her direct way, shall I go to Holy Communion? I want Jesus. How can you do it, my heart, if you don't know your Christian doctrine well enough? Assunta asked, with pain in her voice. You don't know how to read, you see. There is no money for a dress, shoes, or a veil, and you haven't a minute of free time. There is always so much to do. Then, Mamma, dear, I can never make my first Holy Communion. I don't want to stay without Jesus. But what can your poor unfortunate mother do? Assunta sighed heavily. It worries me to see you grow up like a little animal. You'll see, Mama. God will provide. Sister Elvira is at Conca, and she knows how to read. Assunta's eyes brightened, for she knew the kindness of Elvira Chiassi, who had long been in charge of the wardrobe of the Mazzoleni household, and was always ready to help others. I promise you that I'll do the housework first, so that you can let me have the free time to go to Conca and learn Christian doctrine. Maria's voice was eager, and her eyes pleaded with her. And then there's Father Alfredo Pagliani, who comes every Sunday from Cisterna. He'll teach me when the others come for instruction. To this Assunta readily agreed. Her hesitation did not proceed from an unwillingness to grant Maria what she wanted, but rather from her extreme respect for the Blessed Sacrament, and the fear lest Maria be unable under such adverse circumstances to prepare herself worthily. From this day forward, the first Holy Communion became a veritable preoccupation for both Maria and her mother. This overwhelming reality dominated their thinking and their living in the months that intervened. To them, no preparation seemed adequate, regardless of their constant efforts and untiring devotion. More and more, as the time drew near, Maria's spirit withdrew into depths of recollection. More and more lovingly, her deft fingers discharged their numerous duties. The oftener Maria's bright eyes sought the figure of Christ upon his cross, or the face of the Madonna, the more alert they became in detecting every possibility of rendering a service to those about her. As for Assunta, she took Maria more and more frequently to Conca or to Campo Morto, either to confession or to learn more about her faith, and many were her journeys to Nettuno for the same purpose. In her anxiety lest she had not done enough, she approached the archpriest one day and begged him to give Maria an examination. Most Reverend Father, Assunta explained, she cannot read or write. Father Signori smiled down into Maria's intelligent eyes, and his hand rested for a moment upon her head. Assunta withdrew into the church and waited, lost in prayer. The padre fingered the book that he held, but he did not confine himself to its questions. Maria's answers were ready and to the point. She had lived her Christian doctrine, and there was no confusion of words in her mind. Father Signori's kindly brown eyes smiled his approval. Now, run and tell your mother, my child, that I am entirely satisfied with you. Assunta went to thank him, but her heart was still troubled, and she told him of her agitation of mind, lest Maria would not make a sufficiently worthy Holy Communion. "Confide her to the Madonna," Father Signori urged in final reassurance. "Place her under Our Lady's mantle, and then have no fear." This finally convinced Assunta. It was she who had instilled into her child a realization of the holiness of the great act for which she was preparing herself, who had inspired her complete dedication to everything that would lead her to accomplish it in as worthy a manner as possible. Assunta had trembled under her responsibility, but now her eager heart grew calm when she saw that God was blessing her humble work. The virtues cultivated so deliberately and so thoroughly were, as this period proved, a hearty growth. Though Assunta was her daughter's constant inspiration, Maria's spiritual life was not dependent upon that of her mother. For all her gentleness and her docility, there was a virility in her personality, a touch of steel that spoke of an inner life capable of independence. Of this her quick step, her erect stature, were the outward symbols. Assunta came to recognize this and felt reassured. She did not want to bring up her children who were in any way weaklings. Many a time her friends commented upon the fact that she permitted the smaller children to walk the long distance to Mass. "But why not?" Assunta would reply. "They must learn what it means to be a good Christian." A series of spiritual exercises conducted by the Passionists at Nettuno completed for Maria the exterior opportunities of preparation for her first Holy Communion, and she made good use of them. It was the month of May, and the great day was close at hand. Teresa Cimarelli dropped onto the low settle in the Goretti kitchen, where Assunta was building a fire against the dampness. "It's a long walk to Nettuno and back, Assunta, and the devotions are in between. Of course one does it for love, but the feet do get tired." "You do everything for love, Teresa cara," Assunta smiled, "and may God reward you for your goodness to Mariettina. I did well in confiding her to your care. My mind is always at ease when she is with you." "That child is my joy, Assunta. She is lovable as a bambinella and as sensible as a grown woman. You should have seen her today. The sermon was on the Passion, and I don't believe she missed a word. I wonder that she never seems to get tired." "Ah, Teresa, if only she could go to school. Poverina, she has never had anything, and she has less now. She has been forced to grow up long before her time. You should hear how she teaches the children, not only their prayers, but the catechism, and all from memory, as she has heard it in church, or from Luigi and me. How quickly she would learn if only she could go to school." "Stop your worrying, Assunta. That child will surprise you some day. I think our Lord himself is bringing her up and teaching her." Teresa was to speak those words again under circumstances of which no one in Assunta's humble kitchen could have felt the slightest premonition. Maria came in from feeding the chickens, her face glowing from the air, the empty basket in her hand. With one swoop, Mariano, Alessandrino, and Ercilia clamored about her. She had been away from them much too long. The baby staggered toward her. She caught it and kissed it and held it tight. "You are as noisy as the chickens," she laughed. But as soon as the immediate duties were over and Teresa had gone, the look of deep recollection returned. She had come home profoundly moved. "Mamma cara, what a beautiful sermon the priest gave." She referred to it again and again, and ended by repeating the entire sermon to her mother. For Maria, it had not meant the recounting of something that had happened centuries ago, nor was it merely the renewal of devotion to our Lord in his Passion. It was stirring reality, the agony, the blood, the death. The soft Italian sky spent itself in sunlight on the morning of May 29, 1902. The colors of dawn were still lingering over the more slowly awakening west, when Maria opened her eyes to meet the day that was to bring her, in fullest measure, the feast of Corpus Christi. Assunta, whose vigil had preceded the dawn, stood waiting at the bedside, and Maria's first glance went deeply into her mother's radiant eyes in wordless communication. All the birds were out, and the air quivered with their singing. The unworn clothes lay ready. Assunta had wept as she arranged them, the spontaneous gifts of the countryside, the trim shoes that Lucia had brought. Almost timidly, the cloud of a veil, Teresa's gift, Luisa's ivory candle that held so cool to the touch, the wreath of flowers that Elena had woven. The poor had vied with one another in bringing gifts not as an alms but as a privilege. Assunta's gift was the wine-colored dress with the small white dots. Her fingers trembled as she dressed her and arranged the veil over her shining hair. Maria's spirit had flown in advance and was waiting at the door of the tabernacle. What remained of her was an unresisting instrument in her mother's hands. Her smiling lips were silent. Her eyes, flooded with prayer, held no shadow of a glance for herself. Assunta could not do enough. At the last moment she clasped her own coral necklace around Maria's neck and brought her earrings of beaten gold, Luigi's gift of long ago. Something clattered in the kitchen. "Angelo, where are you?" Assunta called, running quickly to ascertain the cause of the noise. "Here I am," the boy answered, coming in through the kitchen door. "Why do you run out when I told you to watch the baby?" Maria had followed her mother. "But Angelo," she begged, "are you giving Mama trouble when you are going to receive Jesus? Think who is coming to you. You should try more and more to be good," she coaxed, tempering her words with a warm smile. As for herself, she wanted to do something more, even during the last hour, to prepare herself for the supreme moment that was to come. Accordingly, she went about the house from one to another, asking pardon for her faults, which, to everyone but herself, were entirely imaginary. The accusations of a sensitive conscience that flies from every shadow of evil. Even Giovanni, with his heavy, half-open eyes, relented from his usual fault-finding and patted her cheek reassuringly. Alessandro was reading in a corner of the kitchen, apparently paying no attention to anyone. Maria approached him. "Alessandro!" Her voice trembled a little. She was remembering keenly all that her father had undergone, all that her mother was suffering from this relationship, and her eyes grew luminous with the tears that she held in check. He rose and faced her. She was not looking so much at him as beyond him. "Alessandro, I beg your pardon." His lips twisted strangely. "Pardon?" he echoed, a little hoarsely. "Why, you didn't do anything." And he turned abruptly away. Maria's thoughts had no more room for Alessandro. They were emptied of everything but the light of the vision toward which she was straining. It was time to go. Maria and Angelo walked together down the road to Conca to the Church of the Annunciation. Assunta and Teresa Cimarelli followed with the other children. All the peasants were abroad today, and the skirts and kerchiefs of the women patched the brown and beaten path with the colors of the pasture lands. As the archpriest, Father Signori, turned from the altar and faced the first communicants, his words came warm with fervor, and the heart of his message was purity. Purity at all costs. For Maria, with all her soul and her deep and tranquil eyes, this recommendation coming at a solemn moment was a sacred seal upon what Assunta had told her, and ever since she could remember. And when the priest gave her the body of Christ and looked upon her face, he knew that she had understood. After the simple ceremony, the children, full of exuberance, gathered about their padre in the sacristy, noisy in their joy and in the expression of their thanks to him. Maria, in years no older than they, did not go with them. She remained apart, serious, silent, recollected, and did not move from her place. Closely Assunta watched her child, and her heart was at peace. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. In the Tall Grasses. "Good morning, Annetta." Maria's quick step overtook the girl who was loitering over the bridge at Ferriere, swinging her water pitcher as though in need of diversion during the uneventful walk to the well. "Hello, Maria! What's your hurry?" But Annetta suddenly quickened her pace when she heard laughter with loud talking and saw the crowd of young people gathering to draw water. She forgot her companion completely when a boy of perhaps 16 or 17 sauntered up to the fringe of the group. Maria was stunned when she heard the easy tone of the conversation that ensued, but paid no further attention until some words the boy was saying forced themselves upon her ears and set her cheeks aflame. She lifted her jug quickly and moved away. Certainly, Annetta would do the same. But Annetta only flashed her teeth and tossed back a reply in kind. Maria would have liked her best to run away, back to Assunta, but the household needed fresh water, and she had to wait her turn. Her heart sickened. Not long ago she and Annetta had made their first Holy Communion together. Shaken out of her usual calm, Maria reached home out of breath. "Mama," one of the girls said an ugly word down at the well. "And you stayed and listened?" "No, Mama." "Such words, my darling, must go in at one ear and out of the other. If you repeat what she says, you are just as guilty. Be very careful never to take part in any such conversations." "I would rather die," Maria answered decidedly. Assunta was satisfied. She knew that Maria would keep her word. "I have been waiting for you," Assunta continued, glad to change the subject. "We must mow the grass today. It is getting much too high. I'll be glad when it is done. I'm always in dread of the snakes." "Don't worry, Mamma. I'm not a bit afraid. I'll walk in front of you with my stick and kill them or chase them away." She did both. Her eyes were fixed upon the grass as she walked ahead of her mother into the grass. "There's nothing here, Mamma," Assunta began to swing her scythe, working quickly as she always did. "We haven't much more to do," Maria called, and a moment later something cold and heavy beat against her ankle. She did not scream as she struck vigorously into the grass with her stick, but the viper slipped under it and away. She began to chase it, but Assunta called with terror in her voice, "Let it go! Let it go!" She came up panting. "Maria, Tina, there's something in the patch over there. I see the grass moving and there's no wind." Maria had seen the same thing. Quietly, she approached the patch, stopping to look and listen at every step, and then she saw it, a large black snake uncoiling itself, happily with its head facing away from her. She aimed her stick at a spot just below the head, struck a forceful blow, and paralyzed it. The tail shivered, but the head could not move. She struck again and knew that she had killed it. Assunta was close behind. "Come, Cara," she said, a bit unsteadily. "We'll go home now. You've done enough work for one day." But the day was not over. Assunta was still out in the field and had the children with her. Maria was sitting at her, mending in the late afternoon, thinking of her father. She was seldom alone like this, and while her fingers were busy, her thoughts went searching for new possibilities of lightening her mother's burden. Thoughts of her father always deepened her realization of the utter misery that had fallen upon the household since his death. Under Serenelli's domination, her mother's lot was becoming more and more a slavery. She herself, no matter what she did, could not please him, and his constant fault-finding was an unending worry to Assunta. The scolding which the Conte Mazzoleni had given him concerning the locked larder had not improved his humor. Alessandro, she supposed, would agree with his father, although he said very little one way or the other. She did not suspect that at that very moment, when she was thinking these things, he saw her at the window, and knowing that she was alone, was hurrying up the stairs. She too was absorbed to be aware even of his presence. She was too absorbed to be aware even of his presence in the kitchen, until she felt his hand upon the back of her chair, and heard words of flattery whispered into her ear that made her jump up, her eyes wide with horror, her cheeks burning. "Alessandro, I will not listen," Go away." She did not understand fully the significance of his words, but something within her warned of danger. He saw at once that flattery would never succeed with her. He tried to hold her fast, but she tore herself away and fled down the stairs and out into the field, the hiss of his final furious words ringing in her ears. "If you tell your mother, I'll kill you." The children were playing, and her mother was making ready to return. The sun had not yet set, but Maria shivered in its warmth, and her teeth chattered as though with cold. Assunta, accustomed as she was to Maria's increasing solicitude, did not notice how she clung to her as they walked home on this particular evening, nor how she followed her every footstep about the house and knelt nearer to her during the family rosary. She was never to know that after she had dropped into the sleep of utter exhaustion, thinking that all was well with the 3 little girls who shared her room, Maria lay wide-eyed in the unrevealing darkness, torn by her first great inner struggle. For the second time, her world had changed its aspect. Luigi's death had taken her childhood from her, taught her the deep pain of loss, and opened a world of labor, care, and deprivation. This day had revealed the nearness of sin, early at the well, and in its later hours as a stark reality such as she had never known. And Alessandro! She shuddered with remembered horror at the cruel surprise. Of a sudden she had to fear something, familiar as daily living. She was not afraid to walk out into the grass and kill a snake. But now a terror had sprung up within the shelter of home. Someone who had just been one brother more had menaced her with death, and with something worse than death. She felt the nearness of her mother, yet that protection was being withdrawn from her. Should she tell Assunta and beg her to flee with the family back home, back to Coronaldo? She knew the answer at once. They would be facing utter destitution, even starvation. She could not bring this upon her mother. Relations between the 2 families had grown sufficiently strained since Luigi's death. If Assunta became aware of the danger, the consequences would be unthinkable. Unflinchingly, Maria's thoughts worked through to the uttermost possibility. If she told, and Alessandro killed her, the anguish of it would fall upon her mother. Maria's rosary was wound about her wrist. She began to pray, and her eyes strained through the dark to reach the Madonna's picture on the wall. A slight breeze that came with the dawn stirred at the window. Before a faint streak of gray lifted the Pontine marshes out of the night, she had chosen her course. She would keep the hideous secret, but never for a moment would she be off guard, and she would pray and pray and pray. When Assunta came into the kitchen, squares of sunlight lay warm upon the stone floor. The flames were leaping high around the swinging kettle, and the hard-crusted bread was cut and ready on the table. And when Maria ran to her mother and kissed her with all the warmth of her usual good morning, she gave no sign that she had entered a new and solitary world of silence and of prayer. End of chapter 14, and that's where we will stop for today. And now we'll pray our novena for the 5th day. We'll pray our Novena Prayer for the 5th day, entitled Confidence in God. She was sustained by her confidence in heavenly providence. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Dear little saint, I depend a great deal upon the help of my friends in time of trouble or sorrow. I look for their approval in many things that I do. I am disconsolate and lonely when they desert me. Through your powerful intercession in heaven, obtain for me the grace to place all my confidence in God. Only by walking constantly in His presence and depending upon His help will I have the courage to stand up for His laws, even though it may mean loss of friends, criticism, and complete removal of worldly comfort. Help me to look for all of my strength in Him. Amen. Now we will continue with the Litany of the Blessed Virgin and the prayer to St. Maria Goretti. And if you'd like to pray along with me on those prayers, click on the link in the description below this video for the daily prayers of the Novena. Join me tomorrow for the 6th day in our Novena. And as you can see, our story is just about to reach one of its climaxes. Join me tomorrow for the 6th day of the Novena here at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon. And don't miss a day of prayer with us.